A joint defense drill between South Korea and the US begins today, ahead of the third Summit for Democracy to be hosted by the Yoon administration later this month. So what is the significance of this scheduled summit amid the current climate of geopolitics? What is the importance of the Freedom Shield exercise? And what are the broader implications of Europe looking to reopen its diplomatic missions in North Korea? Hope your work week is off to a good start. You're watching Issues and Insiders for this Monday. I'm Min Sunhee. Today we have our panel of foreign journalists and their take on recent headlines here on the Korean peninsula. For this, I have Andres Sanchez Braun here in the studio. Andres, welcome back.
Thanks always for having us here, Sunhee.
I also have Matthew Weigand with us. Matthew, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Yes, it's always good to be here.
Yeah. Right. Andres, we'll start with you now. South Korea, it's scheduled to host the third Summit for Democracy later this month. That would be March 18th through the 20th to be precise. Could you tell us a bit about the Summit for Democracy and its agenda for this year?
That's correct, Sunny. Well, this Summit for Democracy was conceived by the Joe Biden U.S. administration. The first edition was held in 2021, and you know, it seems like the idea behind it is comes a bit as in, you know, a way to oppose what the previous president did, in the sense that, you know, he was known to praise leaders that, you know, are basically considered dictators, like Russia's Vladimir Putin or North Korea's Supreme Leader Kim Jongun. So after that 2021 edition, I mean, because of the pandemic, basically the first two editions, which were 2021, 2023, have been mostly virtual. In 2023, actually, Korea was one of the other co-hosts. There was, you know, the U.S. holding it again, but then there were another 4 countries co-hosting: Korea, the Netherlands, Zambia, and Costa Rica, if I'm not mistaken. But this year, Korea is actually holding the 2024 edition. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is expected. He actually said he appreciates the fact that Korea is picking up on this summit. It's that it will be actually holding it, and I think in that sense, this is proof once again that the current government is not about strategic ambiguity, as we've mentioned before here, because, you know, this is an event where countries like, for example, China, North Korea, Russia are not going to be invited, and it sends a message on where you stand and what kind of values you're defending. So I think, you know, Korea makes a point that compared to past administrations, let's say, it is standing, you know, next to democracies, or has a harder stance in this sense.
Right, and let's expand on what Andres has just touched upon. Matthew, what do you suppose is the significance of this particular summit, especially amid the current climate of geopolitics?
Well, it does make a statement, as Andres said. You know, the people who, there's obviously some countries who are not going to be able to attend because they're not democracies. They're not going to become democracies anytime soon. You know, so they're probably not going to show up. But also, it kind of shows. It's kind of a positive and negative, I would say, because it's only the third time it's happened, and it happens kind of virtually. And so a lot of the participants, when they've talked about the first and the second one, they talked about it needs to find its relevance. It needs to create an importance for itself, and they're not quite sure what's going to happen because of this. You know, like, it's basically a U.S.-led initiative from the U.S. State Department, and the countries that are mostly closely aligned with the U.S. are participating most vigorously, and the countries that are a little bit ambiguously aligned are less enthusiastic about it. So it's not so much of a truly international and group effort, but more like a single country-led initiative. So it still needs to look for some sort of relevance and some sort of importance. And I think this kind of ambiguity with the purpose of this kind of event kind of shows maybe a little bit of a problem that democratic countries seem to have in the world right now. They don't seem to have a very strong conviction or a very clear goal on how to encourage democracy or how to create allies or a global vision or things like that, which is something that unfortunately autocracies have in spades. They have one single leader, and that leader has a very clear goal. It's obvious now that Vladimir Putin has had the goal to try to take over the Ukraine for a very long time now, and he's trying to accomplish his goal. And Western democracies are basically caught in a ambiguous and reactionary stance in trying to counter the things that autocrats do.
Hopefully they can use this particular platform to make change for the better then.
Yeah.
Andres, also starting today, that is Monday, of course, South Korea and the US have launched their Freedom Shield exercise. Again, could you give us some background about this particular exercise, and do you believe it well serves its purpose?
That is correct. South Korean and U.S. Troops kick-started the Freedom Shield exercises, the 2024 edition of these exercises. As you know, they're the big springtime annual military drills. And, well, this year, aside from the command post exercises, which are like the virtual simulated part of the exercises, there's going to be a lot of on the ground stuff going on, land, air, sea, according to the Joint Chiefs of Staff of Korea. And among the scenarios that these, that are going to be articulating these drills, there's going to be things going on, like, for example, drills to counter nuclear operations from North Korea. These exercises actually are the first big drills happening since North Korea said that it would not stand by the 2018 North-South military agreement that was designed to reduce tension along the border areas. And this, even though North Korea hasn't conducted recently many weapons of mass destruction tests, we do recall that very recently Kim Jongun told the parliament that unification, reconciliation had to be written off the Constitution, that the South had to be deemed as the #1 enemy. So this is, new hostile language. We've been talking here a lot about what this actually means, if it is true that there's a deep strategic change in North Korea's diplomatic stance. And we still have to find out about it. But these drills come at this very difficult time. So we'll have to gauge what North Korea's reaction is to these drills. Because as we know, North Korea normally considers these drills to be a sort of practice test for invading their territory. And of course, part of these drills include so-called counterattack operations. And whenever I've actually talked to military officers regarding these kind of drills, yes, they do serve their purpose. They are very insistent on how important, especially when there's two countries participating actively in this, which are Korea and the U.S. This year, there's going to be other countries actually sending personnel, people from the UN command. Countries, that's Australia, the UK, Canada, etc. But mainly these drills are always South Korea, US-led. And in terms of interoperability, you need to keep things very fresh. That's what people have told me. You need to do this every certain number of months to stay very sharp in case any conflict breaks out.
Right, especially amid escalating North Korean threats, as pundits say. Matthew, Seoul's defense minister Shin Won-sik last week, he raised quite a bit of concern when he claimed that North Korean factories are operating, and I quote, at full capacity to provide Russia with weapons. How worried do you suppose should the international community be?
Well, he did say that the factories are operating at full capacity. He also mentioned that the factories that are not creating goods for export to Russia are operating about 30%. So it seems like North Korea doesn't really have enough electricity or resources to operate all of its factories all the time. So they're prioritizing excuse me, exports to Russia, exports of weapons to Russia. And in exchange, they're getting a lot of goods and services in return. They're getting a lot of food. They're getting a lot of trade goods. We're not exactly sure what exactly they're getting, but we do know that they have basically stabilized their food supply. So this war is being very profitable for North Korea. And as can be illustrated in the war right now in the Ukraine, in Ukraine, a lot of war is people on the ground who are fighting together, soldiers who are fighting together. But a very, very important part of war, and a lot of people say is the most important part of war, is logistics. Trying to get all those bullets over to the other side as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And if you run out of guns, or you run out of tanks, or you run out of something, you basically lost the war. So that's one of the reasons right now that a lot of European countries and the U.S. are voting for funding to help Ukraine in their fight, because funding means money, and money means equipment, and equipment means you win. And conversely, Russia also needs to get their equipment from somewhere else as well. So North Korea is supplying some equipment. We don't know exactly how much, but they're supplying a non-zero amount of equipment to Russia. And that can be difficult. That can be risky for South Korea, for us in South Korea, because as Andres was saying earlier, the drills that we do every year, trying to make sure that our forces are ready to go, part of that is making sure that everything works correctly and everything works at 100% capacity and everything like that. We could consider that this arms deal that North Korea has with Russia as them doing drills for their factories to be able to produce weapons better, to be able to produce munitions better, so they can work out any kinks, discover any flaws in their processes, basically make their war machine more efficient. And so they might be tempted to use that war machine for other purposes in the future.
Right. Well, pundits had spoken about how North Korea was using Ukraine as a testing ground for some of its weapons. Yeah. Moving forward, Andres, plans are reportedly underway among a number of European countries to reopen their diplomatic missions in Pyongyang. What do you suppose are the broader implications of this diplomatic development?
Yes, as you were saying, we've had on past days, weeks, there was a German official that visited North Korea, and the German Foreign Ministry expressed its intention to look into the possibility of reopening their embassy there. We've heard, countries like Sweden, Poland, the UK, the Czech Republic voice their willingness to do the same, to reopen their embassies. Now, we should remind viewers also that since the outbreak of the pandemic, North Korea decided to isolate itself completely from the outer world, which meant that many staffers in all these embassies in North Korea started leaving their posts. Of course, they didn't want to. Once their terms were over, they didn't want to remain stuck in North Korea. And actually, North Korea, we remember this footage of Russian diplomats being pushed in a cart over that bridge over the Tuman River. So basically what's happened is that all foreign embassies, not all, but mostly all of them, have almost shut down, basically, because they're not staffed. Except for countries that are deemed to be really close at this particular moment with North Korea, which is Russia and China, and then others like Mongolia or Cuba. But what I believe this could signal, I think this is a very positive development overall. I'm not sure it might affect in some way any military strategy that the North already might have or not. But one thing I do know is that it kind of signals that North Korea does not really want to remain completely isolated to the outer world. Having diplomats on home soil means that, you know, even though North Korea is such a tight controlled state, there are going to start being foreign eyes all around the place again. Basically you have your lines of communications as slim as those might be, right? So, of course, in case, you know, any conflict breaks out, hopefully it won't, but having these lines of communications established are always positive. Same thing goes with tourism. We had a Russian group visit North Korea recently. It was a government-to-government thing, apparently very limited, but there is talk that North Korea might actually open its borders towards mid or late spring this year. We'll see about that, but that would signal, I think, pretty much the same thing.
Right, and of course also signal that war is not imminent on the Korean peninsula, hopefully.
Hopefully.
On a lighter note, Matthew, there's been quite a bit of coverage of how North Korea's Kim Jong-un is keeping his eldest son away from the public eye because of his physical appearance. How credible do you suppose are these reports?
Well, it is news about North Korea, so it's always hard to verify, and it's hard to get some concrete evidence about it. But it does make for an interesting story, but maybe not in the way that you may look, maybe not in the way you may think. The South Korean intelligence official recently said that Kim Jong-un is hiding his son because of the way he looks, and that sounds very scandalous. But then the fun twist is that the way that he looks is too skinny. He looks like a normal 16-year-old boy who's just had a growth spurt. Maybe he needs to eat a few more sandwiches or something. But that's the rumor, and they contrast that with Kim Jong-un's daughter, who's about 10 years old, and she looks rather plump, she looks rather well-fed, and she seems to take after her father and her grandfather as well. The story is that in North Korea, a leader gets more respect and commands more gravitas when they are larger, when they have a little bit more presence in the room, physically. So that's the story, that Kim Jong-un is hiding his son because he's still growing, he's a little too skinny.
Right, the idea is that being skinny in North Korea is considered as a sign of poverty, and therefore it'd be better if you were a bit plumber, I suppose.
Yeah, but to give a little context to this, at this time in his life, Kim Jong-un was also completely unknown, and he could have considered to be hidden because he was going to school under an assumed name in Switzerland at the time. And he finished his schooling in Europe, and then he came back to North Korea, and then he was officially revealed after a little bit of a fattening up period, perhaps. And it could be that Kim Jong-un is just giving his son the exact same upbringing that he had. And so we may see his son appear on the world stage in the next few years after he's had a lot more pizza, maybe some ice cream, stuff like that.
And we will not know until then. And staying with children, but back here in South Korea, there was quite a bit of foreign coverage about South Korea's further decline in fertility rate. Could you tell us a bit more?
Yes, unfortunately, Korea lately is on the news for the fact that it's basically the country with the lowest fertility rate in the developed world. The latest figures we saw this week show that the fertility rate, that is the average number of children that women will have during their lifespans or fertility spans, was 0.72. That's 0.06 down from the previous year's figures. That's the average for 2023, 0.72, the lowest amongst developed countries. I mean, it's of course it's opening the debate here of, for example, things like allowing single women to freeze their eggs, for example, which is right now Korean legislation only allows married couples to do that. And I mean, on the other hand, this is not a problem where Korea is alone. I mean, in Asia we have other countries going through the same problems. Japan's fertility rate is very low. China's fertility rate is dropping alarmingly too. Places like Singapore. Singapore comes right after Korea, and it's a 0.97. Also, Europe, most of Europe has very low fertility rates. But I think one thing about Korea or places like Singapore that are, right now leading this very unfortunate ranking is a similarity that you can point here is how population also occupies the space, the geographical space. One big problem in Korea, as we all know, is the increasing cost of real estate, and how, one of the arguments that young married couples say is like, how am I gonna, have a child when it costs so much to buy property here? Well, one problem in Korea is that already more than half of the population basically lives in one area of the country. That's the Sudokmon area where we are right now. That's the capital region. And this kind of configuration, unfortunately, makes real estate prices even, higher. Singapore is a similar case in that, right? In that sense, it's basically a completely urbanized island or set of islands. One key factor here is how do you keep rural areas populated and not, avoid these massive exoduses to cities, right? Which is something that's happening in all developed countries right now, or even in poor countries. We're having people moving from rural areas into cities. But in the case of Korea, it's especially serious, I guess, because more than half of the country literally lives in one spot. So once again, a problem, very difficult one that the government has to try and tackle.
Right, it's a great dilemma, and it's why that's why efforts are being called on all sectors of society to try to deal with the birth rate here in the country. Well, that is all the time we have for this edition. And as always, thank you very much for your time and
Thanks.
your thoughts. And Matthew, thank you very much for your insights.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, well, that ends Monday's edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching. Be sure to join us again same time tomorrow.